Hey you guys, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of Philline, a podcast where we talk about what it's like being in your 20s in the 20s. So for today's episode, I want to talk about how important it is for us to learn how to say no, not just in social environments, not just in making plans, but also in the work environment so we can learn to be our best self and learn to stand up for situations where we really don't want to be a part of. So yeah, let's just get started. Hello, you guys, and happy first Friday of July. I cannot believe it. It's seriously flying by. I know I say this every single episode, but I can't believe it. It's going so fast, and we're halfway through 2021. Can you believe it? I feel like there's so much that happened, but also so much that's going to happen. I'm going to New Orleans soon, and I'm going to be getting another tattoo and just doing a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about my past 2 weeks because a lot has happened in terms of just life in general. I did see my cousin, and she had her wedding last week, which was awesome. A little backstory. I think I said this in my Instagram caption on my personal Instagram, but my father has 11 siblings, and it's not just that. He has, a whole village in the Philippines that he's really tight with, really close with. It's hard to explain, but I guess people with family members who grew up in a village, whether it was in Italy, for example, I think I had a conversation with somebody about this too, that they had a village in Italy where literally everyone knew everyone and everyone was always watching each other's kids, just super open, super welcoming, super tight knit. And that is where my dad kind of grew up in. And I think that's so cool because I just feel like here in America, that doesn't happen as often as it would maybe in other countries or smaller towns or cities. But I don't know, if you guys know stories like this, I would love to hear about it from you guys, especially from people with generations growing up in a totally different country. It'd be so cool to hear about it. But yeah, he knows a lot of people from his village, and literally this whole wedding was a complete reunion. I've seen cousins that I haven't seen in probably 10 or 11 years, and I think that's so crazy that it took that long. And honestly, some of our cousins live in Pennsylvania, which is not even that far from where I live currently, and I just think it's so crazy and kind of an eye-opening experience because I really didn't see my cousins and they live so close. So I definitely was okay, I definitely need to make more effort to at least see my cousins so I don't have to just see them at a big event 10 years later, you know what I mean? So it was really fun, but it was really hectic too because we brought Leo and we brought our family's dog Milo as well. And I don't know if I've talked about this too much, but Milo has separation anxiety, and it was actually a lot worse than what I remember at least. And it was rough because we left him in the hotel to go to the ceremony and he just would not stop barking. And my dad unfortunately had to stay behind during the ceremony, and it became this whole thing. And it's just so sad because, he did miss out on the ceremony, but we still had a great time at the end of the day. But it was just fun overall, honestly. And that's pretty much the biggest thing that happened the past few weeks. And then obviously the holidays came along. 4th of July was really fun. I just kind of chilled at my friend Michelle's house, and it was kind of just a more chilled day. And honestly, it was a little different because it was kind of rainy and there were still fireworks and everything. And it was still just a very great, relaxing weekend, but it was definitely different from my usual party activities from the past couple years. But it was still a great time, and it's just a very relaxing weekend. I felt very renewed, refreshed, re-energized. Also, on top of all this, I did start seeing a therapist. I think I mentioned this in my last episode with Mark, but I did start seeing a therapist, and it actually has been a very great experience for me to just talk about how I'm currently feeling, how I'm handling situations, how I could be better in terms of not being as reactive to certain situations that may happen in my life. And we got into a very important topic of saying no. And this is something that I've definitely struggled with probably my entire life and have only gotten I would say worse since then because I truly don't know how to say no. Like, I guess a big example is just me going to hang out with somebody. I don't know how to say no, although it is one, inconvenient for me and my schedule, and two, just out of the way. Sometimes sometimes people be planning shit with me that's like an hour away from where I live, and sometimes it's just so frustrating because one, I don't make it clear to the people around me when they're making plans that, listen, this is actually out of the way for me. It's pretty far. I already have to drive an hour to get there. And other times, I just don't want to hurt their feelings. And the thing is that I feel like a lot of us struggle with this and saying no. And listen, if you know how to say no, if you know how to put your foot down, blessings up to you because I don't know how to do that. And me, I'm just a yes person. And that's just how I've grown up. That's just always how it is. And especially because my entire lifestyle growing up, we were always busy, always having plans. And when I don't have plans, I almost feel like I'm not doing much. I'm bored. I don't know how to explain it really, but I'm just so used to having such a busy lifestyle to go from one event to the next and still somehow make it on time and still get everything done and get my work done and get chores done and blah, 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 blah. But I know that that's still something that I need to work on, that especially just for your mental health, it is important to learn how to say no. And it's just unfortunately something that not just people take advantage of, but it's just something that at oftentimes people accept in our 20s that, okay, I am just this type of person to say yes. I can't change it. I can't, fix these behaviors. But in truth, you truly can, because there's going to be situations where you want to say no and people will take advantage of that. And something I can really say that happens often is in the work culture, in the work environment. People definitely take advantage of that. And I'm definitely going to talk about that a little bit further in terms of how I've been treated in terms of being a guest person in the work environment, but also just personally. There's just things that I know I need to work on. And I thought it'd be cool to talk about and kind of explore and kind of determine if there's better ways to say no, or at least think about your decision before you make it right away. So to kind of give a perspective, I'm going to start with my talk with my therapist. And I think it was a very good talk. It was funny because basically I was talking to him about how I couldn't really say no to plans. And the thing is, he kind of asked, like, why don't you want to say no? Like, what is so hard about saying no? And my argument about it was like, oh, I don't want to upset anybody. I don't want people to think that I don't want to hang out with him. And it happens often with, honestly, the same people. Sometimes they'll be asking me to go out and do something, but I just can't. And I feel like constantly I'm saying no to the same people. And it's especially hard because sometimes we have different schedules, and sometimes you have to sacrifice your evening, you have to sacrifice your morning time, because it really is the only time that's available for the two of you, the three of you, the four of you, the group of you to hang out. And I think he had said, like, can you say no to your family? And I'm like, well, yes, but also no. I don't know how to say no to my family sometimes. But he stressed on the fact that, saying no is really helpful for just your mental health. You definitely want to take a minute to understand yourself and how you're feeling. Are you really available that day? Are you really mentally okay to socialize again for the third or fourth day in a row? Like, sometimes I really have such a busy week that I'm just exhausted the next week because I didn't have time to really sit down, relax, renew, refresh for the weekend. You know what I mean? Because the weekend was like plans on plans on plans on plans. And the only time I really had time for myself was when I was going to bed and then wake up the next day. And it's the same thing all over again. And I truly feel like with the natural born people pleasers, aka me, it's even harder to say no. Like, I've had situations where at first I'm like, no, I actually put my foot down and say no. But then with a little bit more persuasion, and trust me, it doesn't need a lot of persuasion, I can easily turn my no to a yes. And that is something I truly want to work on. And that's because sometimes I really do sacrifice my own mental health, my own sleep schedule, my own physical exhaustion. I sacrifice that to say yes to maybe, I don't know, someone close to you who needs you, or someone who just wants to hang out, or somebody that you've already told no a million times and you feel bad saying no for the millionth and first time. So it's just things like that that I know I'm not the only one struggling with. So I wanted to kind of work on it. I wanted to really think about how I can at least try to say no more, especially in situations where I really don't want to do anything. And I'm going to try to talk about work too, because it's important. In our 20s, we're new employees, we're young, we're not really familiar with the work environment yet. I mean, some of us are, some of us aren't, but even so, we're probably average 5 to 8 years experience right now at this point. And people who, notice that and kind of are aware of this, sometimes we'll take advantage of it. I mean, a good example I can say is in a previous job. I was busy with a bajillion other things, and somebody had asked me to do something for them that honestly took about an hour or two out of my day. And because I, in my head, thought, I was like, this person's older, this person has more experience, even though they had the same job title as me. They were literally not a supervisor, not a manager, not a senior, whatever. They were the same job as me, same level. And I was honestly doing most of their work, and that irritated me a lot because, one, they were getting credit for it, and two, I was the one exhausting myself while the other person was, chilling, not doing anything, still getting the same pay. Nothing irks me more than when I see somebody getting taken advantage of in a work environment for the same salary, and they have to do twice as much work as the person next to them. And I know anybody listening can 100% relate to this, because honestly, 3 people get paid the same. One person busts their ass off. The second person doesn't do shit. And the third person is like kind of in the middle. Isn't that crazy? You really can have a spectrum. It's not even just 3 different levels. You can have a spectrum of how hard people work and they still get paid the same. So when I am explaining this to you, what I'm trying to say is basically this. Do not overwork yourself for the salary that you have, because there are other people who are not burning themselves out. And when I say that, I'm not saying, okay, do the minimum, be lazy and like low-key like finesse your way out of doing something because your salary is low. No. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that you don't need to break your back for other people, period. Like whether it's in the work environment, whether it's personal, whether it's for your friends, you deserve time for yourself. You deserve a moment to say no, and you deserve situations that you don't have to be a part of. And I guess what I'm saying is this, that, you don't want to keep bending your back for a company. I'm going to stick to just the work environment for now. I'll get more into personal stuff eventually. But for the work environment, do not continuously say yes to the late 9 o'clock meetings, even though they're outside of your work time, for other people who aren't even showing up to work on time, for example. You definitely have to be more aware when something is being taken advantage of, it, especially because something that you think is nice is actually something that doesn't actually give you credit. You know what I mean? If you're doing someone else's work, especially in the work environment, nobody will ever notice because it's not technically under your job description, for example. You just have to notice when someone's taking advantage of you. And I think that's something very common in our 20s, that people think that just because we're young and naive, we can do whatever we want. If you just ask, especially if it's somebody with more experience or a higher level, no, you have to really stand up for yourself. And I think we don't do that enough, especially in the work environment when we're just new. We think that, oh, this is our key to getting up the levels. But truth of the matter is, no, you can find a job that has an amazing work culture. I've said this a couple times that I've already had 3 full-time jobs in the 3 years that I've been working full-time after graduating. And I've had 3 different experiences. And what I'm saying by that is there are jobs that will overload and overwork you just because you say yes to them each and every time. And listen, there is nothing wrong with saying that you're overwhelmed at work. My manager definitely has taught me a bunch of lessons in that aspect in my current job. They always ask, are you okay with your workload? Which I think are very serious and very valid questions to ask your employees, because sometimes people do feel overwhelmed and they don't really talk about it. And again, with people our age, I think that we purposely overload ourselves to show that we are hardworking and we can handle anything that's thrown at us. But having that in your resume that I can handle anything thrown at me doesn't mean that you won't communicate when this is becoming a negative effect on your mental health, on your physical health, on your social life. It's about finding that good work-life balance. And I think it starts when you can finally speak up and say, no, I really can't handle another project right now. Is there any way that I can start this in a week or so? And mind you, there are better ways than just saying no to communicate that you can't handle something, or right now it's not the right time for you to have something else on top of your current workload. For sure, you can definitely discuss that with your manager, but you have to think, right? You're a human being and so is your manager. So when I'm saying that, your manager probably doesn't even know you're overloaded because you have not communicated that to him or her. And that's also important. I stress communication a lot, and especially in the work environment, I think it's super important to just be transparent. And I feel like, again, in our 20s, we try so hard to put this front that we're not overwhelmed. We can handle anything, like literally give me all the work possible. But you can't forget that you're at this specific salary that you don't need to be showing to people that you can handle millions of work. It's that saying, I think J. Cole also has said before, quality over quantity. 110,000%. That is what I preach for. You can have 3 projects and beautifully execute them, and then have 20 projects and just crash because you forgot this little detail, you forgot to make this document for this project, you forgot to move on to this next step because you were busy focusing on your other project. That doesn't show high quality work. And I feel like that is what managers look for more than anything, that you can beautifully execute and complete projects rather than having 20 projects all at once. Now, when I'm talking about saying no, professionally at least, there are some ways that are not looked good upon, and then there are some ways to say it right professionally. And I want to talk about this because sometimes, there's just things we can't learn in school and college, and communication is one of those. We learn how to properly communicate based on our personal experiences. And anybody can argue with me, but I will keep my foot down on this point that how we interact with people is based on our personal experiences. And I feel like people obviously have different experiences, and I feel like because of that, people react or say no or answer to other people in different ways. So sometimes it can come off as rude. And, I don't blame the person for replying rudely, because sometimes that's just how they keep their guard up, or for other reasons based on past experiences. That is how they respond and say no. So I guess what I'm saying is, for this episode, it's important to understand the nicer ways to say no, because I've definitely had very rude responses in terms of no sometimes. And I would think, I'm like, damn, I wouldn't respond that way. But you have to think about it, right? Like, the only thing you can really change is how you communicate with other people. And maybe how you communicate will be some kind of beacon to them and be like, wow, they actually responded to that in a really nice way. I think I want to learn how to do that as well. So it's a good start to start with yourself. And I think that that's really all we can do these days. Really focus on how we ourselves interact professionally, personally, just in every level. And I think a good way to start is to understand that saying maybe, or I don't think so, or maybe later, or potentially, those words will not give a definite no to whoever you're talking to in the work environment. And it's kind of hard because sometimes people say, oh, yeah, sure, maybe next week we can. And then, you're going to get your coworkers' hope up. You're going to get your whoever you're talking to, their hopes up. And then next week will come around. And again, you're pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. Pushing it away is pretty much worse than giving a definite no, because at least when you say no, that's it. You cut it. It's done. It's over. No more bringing it up again, and it's done. But when you say maybe next week, that gives that other person the hope that maybe you'll help them the next time, or maybe you'll answer their response the next time. You'll do their work again the next time. And I think the biggest response you can say right now is that, unfortunately, I have a lot of commitments today, or I have quite the workload today. I'm not sure if I can help you at this time. It's very easy to politely say it. If you really think about it, it's hard when you are at the moment thinking about what to say. So I'm basically laying out the basic responses right now that you can definitely say that won't hurt somebody's feelings. You know what I mean? And there's also other things like, oh, right now is not a good timing. Can you maybe keep me in mind for the next time? Or, one way I say it is, how about you try it first? Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you need any extra help. But first, it gives that other person the opportunity to obviously do it themselves, because that's basically you saying, how about you do it and you come back to me if you need any help, right? So then you can also just say like, thank you for offering, thank you for asking, but I unfortunately just can't make the time for it today. And I know that sounds super, even when I say it right now, just recording, I feel like an asshole just saying it. But you really have to put your foot down, especially in the work environment. You don't want your own tasks that are assigned to you under your job responsibility to cross with something else that maybe isn't under your job description that is going to potentially affect the outcome of your current projects that you're really supposed to be focusing on anyways. And again, I know people listening are like, oh, I really don't want to, but just remember, the more that you practice, the easier it will be to understand and be aware of your workload, of your current emotional state, and be able to put your foot down when you physically, emotionally, mentally cannot take any more. And that is a very important quality for us growing up in our 20s, because there are so many opportunities for especially people who have been in the company for so long, or older people, to take advantage of us, give us more work than we can handle because we don't speak up and we just openly keep taking more. So work-wise, I feel like I've kind of covered small things that we can do, to realize when somebody is taking advantage of you, and realize that you have your own job description, and to really focus on making sure that emotionally, physically, mentally, you are at your work-life balance, because you don't want work to just be the only thing you do every day. It's so sad because there's more to life than just work. I think many people forget that, especially in our 20s when we're trying to build a career. There is still time to have fun, regardless of if you have kids, regardless if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, but even though right now we're focusing on the 20s, but it doesn't matter how old you are, you still have time to make for yourself, and you deserve it, My therapist always reminds me you deserve to have self care, a moment for yourself, and a moment that you don't need to use to socialize. Sometimes, these days my social meter just be on low. I really just make plans. And sometimes when I'm about to leave, like literally the social event has not even started, my social meter is already at -50. Like it is totally normal to not want to be social, to not want to do things. And that's totally okay. I feel like as especially in our 20s, we're supposed to be social. We're supposed to be hanging out with our friends, going out, partying, blah, blah, blah. It's like wrong to not want to go and hang out with somebody, like God forbid. But you guys deserve time to not have any plans. And I definitely am working on that 100%. I still struggle with that because it's just how I've been. That's just how my lifestyle has been. I don't have time for myself, and it's just something that I'm used to, but I can't use that as an excuse to not want to change because sometimes I physically cannot handle another interaction. Like, please leave me alone. You know what I mean? And again, it's totally normal to feel that way. And I really didn't get comfortable with that feeling until recently when I'm like, okay, why am I so afraid to say no to people? It's so uncomfortable. I don't know why. That's just, I guess, who I am. It's just how I've interacted. I've always been scared to say no. But why? Why are we so afraid to say no? It's really not that scary, actually. It allows us to make time for ourselves to rest, recharge, do activities that sometimes don't need socialization to do. Finally read that book, finally touch a piano, finally play some guitar, finally finish that level of the Avengers video game you've been stuck on. Just a few examples. And honestly, it sets boundaries, right? So on a personal level, when you say no, it helps set boundaries. Like sometimes you have those friends that constantly want to be around you at all times. And listen, at first, it always sounds great. It always sounds great when you see on Instagram or social media 2 friends that hang out constantly, all the time, forever. But even that can get exhausting. And it's honestly exhausting because of the fact that you don't get time for yourself. It comes to the point where, let's say, the 2 friends, one of them wants to just hang out with you while you're folding or like cleaning the house or things like that. They don't need to be there all the time. And I feel like sometimes we get stuck in those friendships, relationships, partnerships, work relationships where the other person is just way too dependent on you. And being able to set that foot down, saying no, really sets boundaries with the people around you. Like, okay, great. You want to hang out with me all the time. I love that. I love your company, but I do need some time and space for myself to refresh and renew. And honestly, saying that is probably really hard. I mean, me personally, I still to this day have trouble saying that to people. And again, I just don't know why it is so hard for us to speak on that and say no. It really is something important because it helps us navigate our feelings, our life, and allow more opportunities to do things on our own that might be more meaningful rather than, having someone with you. And also, I think that kind of ties in with being alone and being able to be alone. I think that saying no also helps you practice that. It helps you not be so reliant on other people to, let's say, get the chores done because all of a sudden you're doing chores and you're like, damn, this is kind of lonely without so-and-so. But do you really need somebody with you all the time? That's the thing. I think when you really think about somebody being your follower all day, every day, it gets kind of exhausting, especially because sometimes you just need a minute. You need a minute to be by yourself, clear your head, and just be there, be in the moment, be present by yourself and understand how you're feeling. What can you do to improve your quality of life? Because again, these are practices that not just are important in our 20s, they are going to follow us. Because when you have trouble saying no now to not just your work life, your work friends, your coworkers, your personal friends, your family, When you have kids, that's going to be even worse. You have to say no to your kids sometimes. You're not going to, just say yes to your child crying to eat the crayon. Am I right? Like, it's practices that are important, not just for you, but also for your future kids to have an example of why saying no is super important. Now, if you're like an impulsive yes person like me, one thing I can definitely try to help with you to help say no is that I know in the work environment, I said saying maybe is not a good idea, but when it comes to personal things, if you're an impulsive yes person, I feel like, and this is something I just am practicing recently, by the way, it's something my therapist recommended, but if you really aren't sure if you want to go through with that plan, literally just be like, hey, I'm really busy right now. Can I give you a couple hours and then get back to you? And it's amazing what a couple hours can even just do for you mentally, because you want so bad to say yes because you feel bad, but you also don't want to go. And I think that gives you the opportunity to not just think about what you want to say and also just figure out, if you really want to go, but it also just gives you a minute to not be so quick to say yes. And I think that's also something that I've been working on too, in terms of just trying not to always just say yes to everything. It gives you a minute, right? And I think this is especially important for somebody who's trying to like save money and things. Will saying yes to this thing prevent me from focusing on something that's more important? Will this thing help me reach my goals, which is, for example, saving money? And also, you don't have to just say no. If you really want to hang out with that person, but right now what their plans are either annoying, expensive, out of the way, just be straight up. People, again, like I said, are just so afraid of being transparent and just straight up. But being straight up is the best way to go, because yes, it sometimes hurts someone's feelings, or it just sometimes really just brings out the hard truth. But cases like this, you're like, bro, I'm sorry, I can't go out like that. It's expensive. Like, I don't got money like that right now, or that's pretty far. Can we meet somewhere in the middle? I feel like me sometimes I'm afraid to say those things because I don't want them to be like, well, it's really not that bad of a drive, or really like, I don't want them to think that I don't want to put in the extra effort to drive all the way there. But at the same time, like, bro, it's too far. Like an hour and a half drive just to go somewhere. That's ridiculous. Like, just for a couple hours of hanging out. Honestly, anybody would also be like, yeah, that's really not worth it. So you have to think about it too. You're really burning more than really what you need. If you wanted to meet in the middle, a 20-minute drive versus an hour and a half back and forth, it's a lot less on not just your gas, your money, your mental health, just everything. It's coming to an agreement between you and your other person. And then another question I ask is, if I say yes to this, am I going to regret it? And, I feel like that ties a lot with the travel time, the money spent. You really have to think about it. And I think, again, I was always saying yes to things because I just didn't think too much about these questions. Is it really worth my money, my time, my travel to do all of this for this specific hangout or whatever this person's asking me? And again, like, for example, let's say you have hella chores right now to do. You have things to get done. You have a project. And I think this is a lot more harder to do in college than now. But if you're drowning in stuff and somebody asks you like, hey, right now, can you do this? Can you come with me to the mall? And next thing you know, 4 hours goes by, and those are 4 hours you could have used to finish your chores, to study for a test, to get your work done for something, and now you're crunching time to finish your project or whatever you had to get done. Now, the feeling of procrastination and frustration is definitely not something new to anybody listening, but we all hate it. It's stressful, it's not worth it, and honestly, half the time you procrastinate, you don't come out with a high quality end result or outcome. And really, in our time right now in our 20s, choosing to procrastinate is really a not right decision. It's very stressful for you. And again, it's better that we start early practicing avoiding procrastination, because when things later on in life have hard deadlines, it's not a good practice to keep pushing them back. So we start as soon as possible. And I think, again, this is where we really just be crystal clear instead of being wishy-washy, just say no and really put your foot down. And I'm telling this to myself too, you know what I mean? Like I'm still working on how to do it right. And you have to think about yourself. Be selfish for a little bit sometimes. It's not always about being there for someone around you. It's also about being there for yourself. If you physically or mentally or emotionally cannot handle it, you really have to take care of yourself. Because if you're not feeling 100%, you really won't feel 100% being with other people. So you have to kind of think about it like that too. And I feel like for everyone who's like me, who basically had to deal with a lot of people pleasing in childhood and growing up, it's very hard to voice your opinion and just say no and just really be clear when you don't want to do something. So it's a practice that we can get out of. And I feel like, again, a lot of people don't really think they can change it. But truth is, we're really just afraid to be rejected. And honestly, the hard fact of life is that you will be rejected or people won't be happy with your responses sometimes. And honestly, that shouldn't be something that prevents you from saying no. And it becomes to the point where, we're so used to saying yes and pleasing everyone around us that we really truly don't know what we want or what our needs are. And we get lost. There's always moments where you're saying yes to everything all the time. And next thing you know, 3 weeks go by and you don't really have a set plan for yourself financially, mentally, emotionally. And it's really detrimental to just you as a person and becoming your best self. And you really have to think about it, is it really going to be worth however much I'm going to spend, and I feel like that's the hardest in the summertime because you always just want to be out. I don't know about you guys, but there are cheaper ways to, be out and party hardy. Like I went to the beach with my friends a couple days ago. I didn't spend a dime. I mean, I paid $10 to get in and I bought like an extra drink, but I just didn't want to spend money. So yes, you can still go out, just not have to spend all that money. And you really have to think about it. How many times have you gone out with people that you really don't want to go out with at the time? How many weddings, for example, that you've been to that you really didn't want to go to? And listen, there could be reasons besides the fact that you didn't want to go. I guess what I'm saying is that if you really couldn't afford the wedding at the time, you really have to think about that too. Like your friends, if they're true friends, will understand if you can't go somewhere because you don't want to spend your money on it. And those are the true friends that really just want to hang out with you because they want to hang out with you, not because they want to go somewhere and just spend their money. You know what I mean? There's so many different things you can do that don't cost as much as what the current plan is. And like I said, these opportunities where you say yes all the time is a very big door for people to start using and taking advantage of you. It's basically like, they know that you're a yes person and that you really fall into guilt and they'll use that to your advantage. Maybe you're the type of friend who goes out and says yes and pays for everything. Like I unfortunately fall into that category. I really just like to hang out, and if I'm already drinking, that's it, it's over. I'm paying for all of our shots and things like that. But that's why you have to really think about it. Saying yes isn't always the right thing to do. And then there's a quote that I saw, I guess, when I was like looking stuff up on this, and it says by psychologist Helene Brenner, you can't give a real wholehearted yes if you don't feel like you can ever say no. And that has never rung so hard in my brain because it's not that I wholeheartedly say yes and I have struggles like not making it wholeheartedly, but it's more of the fact that if you really can't say no, then, what does that say about you? Do you really want to make these plans with people? And especially if people know that you can't say no, like, they'll really think on their end, is she really just saying yes because she feels bad, or does she genuinely want to do things with me? So before you go and say yes right away, really check in with yourself. Are you feeling guilty if you have to say no to somebody, that can mean a lot of things. It also can say something about your relationship with whoever you're talking to about making these plans. Are you afraid of them? Are you really that close with them? Is your friendship really that strong and pure and transparent that, you can't even say no? That says something too, It's something to think about, especially because it says a lot about people around you. Like sometimes you think you're really close with somebody, but really you're afraid of them. You can't say no to them. And that's something that should, kind of flick on in your brain. Like, damn, I need to work on that. And another thing I have to say about saying no is don't apologize for saying no. Literally, that is a pet peeve of mine. Don't say sorry to me if you don't want to hang out or if you don't want to go through with some plans. You aren't sorry. This is something that you decided. You have no reason to feel bad about telling somebody no, especially if it's overwhelming your already heavy loaded plate. You know what I mean? You don't need to be telling someone sorry because you don't want to hang out. That's something, you can definitely practice over time. And, when it happens, don't beat up yourself over it, but just really realize that it's happening quite often that you're saying sorry because you really don't need to be saying sorry. You have every right to make use of your valuable time because it's something that you literally cannot get back. If you make that decision to not want to spend money to not drive that far, that's totally okay. And again, if they're true friends, they would accept and understand this from you. You can't beat yourself up for wanting to say no just because on how someone else responds and how you're afraid on how they'll respond, because how they respond is up to them. You know what I mean? If they don't take your no in a respective manner and understand, then that's a whole nother thing, sis. You gotta reassess your life and your friendship with that person. You have to think about that. It's not about being polite at this point. It's about understanding when you need self-care, you need time for yourself, and that it's just not worth it to go all the way there, And like I said, give yourself the time to think about if you really want to pull through with the decision. And if you do decide that you don't want to pull through, keep to it. You know what I mean? Don't let others persuade you otherwise, because you know that the right thing is not to pull through with this specific event or plan or something that someone's reaching out to you for. You really decide that for yourself. And again, you don't have to justify your answer. You don't owe anybody an explanation. If you don't want to go just because you don't want to, that's totally fine. Like, you don't owe anybody an explanation. And if someone asks why, like, literally just simply be like, listen, I need time for myself. I need some time to breathe from already the 9-to-5 job that I have, the kids that I take care of, the chores that I have to do, the adulting, the paying the bills. I really don't have the flexibility right now to keep that in my plans. And people who don't understand this are really, I wouldn't say they're not true friends, but you have to really think about your relationship with them, because if they can accept you for the no's, not just the yeses, but also the no's are always the most important. If they can't understand your flexibility, your schedule, it says something more. There's something more about that friendship and relationship you have to consider and think about, because they should be understanding. Like, people literally have a lot of stuff going on. And if they can't understand that, well, you got another problem. But also, you just need to take time for yourself. I feel like in our 20s, and especially where I live, and honestly, where I live right now is not even that hectic, but even in the cities like New York City, life is always moving fast. And before you know it, you forget to take care of yourself. And our health is probably the most important thing, because if we are not healthy, we can't even have plans in the first place. So we need to understand, I'm not feeling good enough to socialize right now. I want to have time for myself. You have to put your foot down, whether it's work or personal things. And honestly, work is just something else I get triggered about because it's not always about work, and employers and coworkers often forget that. They are so hung up in trying to be the best employee, or they honestly lose their fire that they're just on automatic mode, that they just want everybody to be in the same mindset as them. But you have to keep the fire in yourself. You have to understand that yes, work is important, and yes, work pays the bills, but not at the risk and extent of sacrificing your own emotional state. And the earlier we start to practice this, the easier it'll be down the line when we have so many other things in our life, so many other things that we have to keep track of and pay for and reach deadlines and all that stuff. And honestly, at the end of the day, when you do say no and you do have time to take care of yourself and do things that you want to do by yourself, you'll thank yourself. Like, there's never a time in my life that I've regretted saying no to something because I want to relax or I want to take care of things in the house, because I feel accomplished. I feel, again, re-energized, renewed. And that's so important for ourselves in our 20s, because we need to set those boundaries between going out too much, making plans too much, overlapping things too much, and making time for ourselves. So I think that's so important. And it really is the small things, even changing that small thing in your life, you'll find that you're a little bit happier and a little less overwhelmed and a little more focused in your headspace. Because if you're always worried about the next thing coming up or the next plan, how are you supposed to take a breather and really take in the moment and enjoy how you're feeling right now in this moment and really be appreciative of everything you have? So that's my 5 cents on saying no. And I want to thank you guys so much for listening. And, if you have any questions, concerns, DMs, feel free to reach out to me at Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. My Instagram and TikTok is at Philline Podcast, and my Twitter is at Philline. So yeah, and that's it. Thank you guys for listening. I do want to say, as a little preview, I'm going to have a few more guests next couple of episodes, and we're going to be talking heavily about music, and I'm so excited because that is literally my number one favorite thing in this entire planet, and that's music. Well, food too, but anyways, till next time, bye.